we're going to be making a Tsuru rose. This is an original design of mine. It is based off a traditional crane with some of my rose tiling and floral tiling patterns for tessellations done in the center of the paper. What this allows for is when you fold the crane, there'll be like a very detailed rose in the center. We generally want to start with 8-inch to or 20 centimeter kami. That's what I'm using in this video. Oh, sorry, not kami, double tissue. So 8-inch double tissue. Some tools you might want are a folding tool and an embossing tool. So we're going to pull up the crease pattern here. The main thing we want to focus on is the green lines right now. What we need to do is get 16ths in the center of the paper with the outer force not folded into. So basically the inner sections will be folded down into 16ths. If you were to continue those folds, it would actually be 30 seconds all the way through. But as we're not folding the outer edges, the inner edges will be divided up into, or the inner sections will be divided up into 16ths. So to start with, this first crease, if you want your rose, in this case, I have pink on one side, white on the other. If you want the rose to be primarily pink, you're going to start with the pink side up and make this crease. It's kind of counterintuitive because when you're making a normal crane, you do the reverse. You'd have the white side up and you'd see the pink as you folded this book fold. But because the center is going to be a square twist, it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, it just it gets reversed a little. Because the crease that ends up being the edges of the preliminary are actually the creases next to this crease. This crease turns into a pleat for the twist. So we're going to go ahead and fold the book fold across the other way, lining the paper up. The double tissue I made here is a just treated calligraphy paper. And on the other side, it's just standard pink bleeding tissue paper. I forget what exact brand. I think I bought it on Amazon. So now we're just going to fold the edges to the middle all the way around. What we're trying to do here is just get the force. Going all the way through. Using my folding tool here. The crease is nice and sharp here. At this point, I'm going to skip forward a little in the video because we're just folding force. So there we go. Just trying to edit this in VoiceOver for time reasons. So now you can see the intersections there. Those intersections need to be in the 16ths. or 16ths of the inner section. It would be 30 seconds of the full. At this point, I'm just explaining how I liked how the paper came out. Skip forward a little. So now what we're doing is we're folding in between the quarters. And then you'll have inner ace, or the in between the quarter creases, you'll have 4 sections. So you'll have 4 kind of divided in on the center bits. So I'm going to skip forward a little. Actually, no, we have. Okay, so there's our force. Now, once you have the force, you're not going to be able to use the same method of folding to the furthest crease to get in between all of them. It'll work for the, I want to say the outermost or the innermost. Yeah, it works for the outermost. But you don't have the guide crease or a reference crease to get the inner ace done. So we're just going to start by getting the outer ace done in our middle section by folding the raw paper edge to the creases we just made for getting the inner paper into force. As you can see, we don't have the edge there, so we're just going to go ahead and go over here and just get those folds in between ready to go. So at this point, I'm going to skip forward a little. Once you have there we go. Okay. So once you get those outer bits done, you're going to be pleating the paper to get the inner ace. So you're just taking the creases you made prior, you're lining them up. So you're just folding in between the creases until you've gotten the intersections divided by ace. So I'm going to skip forward a little more. Still working on the ace. So we're just going to keep going forward a bit. There you can see the technique. Should go back just a little so you can see the technique for getting the other ace done. So you don't have a crease on the edge where you need to hold up, so you're just gonna kind of take the paper and make a little pleat like such to get the inner ace, and repeat that all the way around, folding and unfolding, folding and unfolding until the center is divided into ace. So I'm just gonna skip forward. There we go. So now I'm dividing each of these ace the same way I did it when I was doing the inner ace into 16ths. So that division is actually a 32nd of the total paper width, but I'm going to call it 16ths for now because really we're just dividing the inner 2/4 of the paper, or the inner half of the paper, if you will. So we're just going to call it 16ths. I think that works better visually since you're not folding all the pleats. So you're going to work your way around folding. Once you have the inner halves folded into 16ths, you'll be ready to go for the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and skip past folding into 16ths. So in a little bit, if you're still folding these 16ths, or if you ever get stuck on a phase where I'm skipping ahead, because it's just repetitive, fold between the lines, feel free to pause the video, catch up, and then once you've completed these folds where you got these inner 16ths done, then feel free to unpause and continue. I mean, at this point in the video, I'm still folding 16ths one way. I still have to fold the 16ths the other way, so it's still going to be a bit. So I'm going to skip forward for time's sake. This is just doing the exact same thing on the other direction. As you can see. Skipping for a little more. We're almost there. Okay, at this point, if you're still folding the 16ths in the center, go ahead, pause the video, and go ahead and catch up some. So I'm going to pause the video here. At this point, we have our 16ths done both ways in the center section of the paper. So your goal right now is, if you were to look at that initial crease pattern that was at the beginning of the video, you saw those green lines, just the green ones, where you had all those divisions going in the middle of the paper. Actually, I might be able to pull that up over it. Image. Actually, let's do... Let's get this over. That's what I want. So, if you're looking at this, what we have done is we folded, ignore the gray lines, they're just there so you can tell that this is a quarter of the paper. So what we've done now is we have folded the paper in half both ways, and we have gotten all these little divisions going in the center. So we have the 16ths going that way and the 16ths going that way. So if you're still folding this point, hopefully that's what you should have, those green lines. Let me go ahead and hide this. So at this point, hopefully you've folded the 16ths properly in the center. You can go ahead and unpause the video. I'm going to do that and get back to the media source and hit play. So now what we're going to do is we're going to find the center of the paper through all these creases, which can be a little hectic. The easiest way to do this is with the, and there's the crease pattern again from the original video. The easiest way to do this is to get the paper with the pink side facing you, or the whatever color side you have facing you, the white side down, and fold corner to corner and corner to corner each way, creasing sharply toward the corners and a little softer toward the center. You just need enough of a crease in the center so you can identify which intersection is the center. So I'm going to skip forward a little because it takes me a little while to, since this is a little different the way than I usually do it. The other thing I'm pointing out now is, depending on which way your twist goes, and up there is an example of the square twist that'll come off the center of the paper. Depending on which way the twist goes will depend also on what color the model is. So if you look, I'm going to pause here. If you look at this little preview image, you will notice that the gray portion, the portion that looks gray here, on the preview of the Orietta, if this is what it looks like on top of your model, then this color, this side, will be the inside of the crane. So whichever side doesn't have the square visible on the square twist, that will be the primary color of your model. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. So we have found center. And because we want the twist, or the paper in this case, to be, lock that so I don't see that border popping up on OBS. Because we want the twist or the paper to be pink, what we're going to do is we're going to, and I'm just embossing it to help it collapse, is we're going to have the twist pop out such the white side has the square. So you can pre-crease or emboss the blue lines that make up the square twist in this little diagram. What we're going to do is we're going to flip it over so we see the white side once we've got those creases in. And we're going to rock the crease directly in the middle of the paper down and just put a little indentation, as you can see there, to start the twist. And we're going to kind of squeeze those two corners together, creating pleats off our creases going down the edge of the paper. And one pleat's going to go one way, so if that pleat goes up, this pleat also will go up because we've rotated the paper, we flipped it over. But the pleats should one pleat should go one way, the other pleat should go the other way, which I'll show here in a sec with the profile. I'm just making sure basically that square, that pinched square, if you see that in the middle of the paper, I'm making sure that the creases all line up with the grid. Kind of like you see in the crease pattern over there. Do you imagine I unfolded it? All the creases should neatly line up with the grid. All the folded paper edges should also line up with the grid, as you can see there. I'm just showing how it doesn't matter which way you put the twist. If the twist faces like the other way, so if like that pleat was going to the right instead of the left and the other side was going to the left instead of the right, it would just mean the rose would twist out one way versus a different way. What matters is which side you see the square on. So there I'm showing some of the crease structures. Now we're going to open it up as far as it goes along that twist, and it should fall along the crease lines. Flip it over and finish off your twist by rearranging the layers such that you see the twist coming off. And we have a square twist in the center of our paper. So now what I'm doing is getting the paper really nice and flat and making sure all the creases really line up. At this point, if you're still working on your square twist, you may want to pause the video and just make sure you have the paper really flat before you unpause. So now what I'm going to do is get to the media source. I'm still flattening it here. I'm going to skip ahead a little to the first collapse. There. So we're basically setting up creases for what you see on the crease pattern in the upper corner. And to do this, we're going to flip the paper to the underside of the crane where we see the square part of the square twist. And we're going to make a pleat through one of the layers, as you can see there, right along the edge of the twist pleat, such that the folded edge is lining up directly with the middle of the paper. That's what we're going for. We're trying to get that folded edge, as you can see. So we're kind of making a crease two away. In this case, I just have to reverse the crease because it was being stubborn, and I had put that crease the wrong way. And you'll find you may need to reverse some creases here and there through the model. It's not too big a deal. There. So I reversed the crease, I put in the pleat. Remember, that crease was very stubborn and did not want to reverse for whatever reason. So now once you get these pleats in, you're gonna make sure it stays really flat, and then you're gonna unfold those two pleats. Careful not to unfold the twist though, just the pleats. And what we're doing here is we're getting the outer bits of this crease pattern done. The long blue lines, that's what we're doing in this crease pattern. Just in the center of the paper. Obviously there's more grid that we have to work with. This is just kind of a close-up of the center without the twist in this crease pattern. So it's easy to see what you're doing over top the twist without having to think about all the layers underneath the twist. That's the whole point of this crease pattern here. Now what we got to do is put in these red diagonals. So where, if we flip it over, where you see we have a mountain kind of framing that twist from underneath, we're looking for where those two mountains intersect that we made. So in this case, when it was upside down, they were valleys, they were blue, but now we're looking for them as mountains, because we flipped the paper over, so all our valleys become mountains. And so we're just going to go ahead and crease a 45-degree angle along those two mountains. So you'll see here, all you really got to do this is kind of pinch it between the crease intersections in the right spot. So as you see, I'm just pinching, meeting up with that intersection that I was mentioning. Pinch, pinch, pinch. There we go. Now I'm going to take the pinches pretty far out, a little farther than they need to go, which is fine. It'll just really help with some of the later folds. You kind of got to take these creases out farther than you think you need to for the other red diagonals that happen later. So as you can see here, I'm just pinching between everywhere where those mountains intersect. I'm adding more mountains. Now you can see where these creases kind of extend past. And we're going to put a parallel line from those creases. One intersection, one grid intersection down. You can kind of see that there. So again, we're just pinching. A pinch between the one intersection down from the creases we just made along the grid. If you're familiar at all with the hydrangea tessellation, this is pretty similar here. The last step here is we need a valley right there and right there. Some of these creases do end up getting reversed. So now we're doing, now that we got all those pre-creases in, I'm basically walking the pleats back in along the edges that we put in earlier. kind of up to what's going to be the collapse. A little bit shy, really, before we're going to collapse. You'll notice it kind of makes this weird geometric, like, gem shape almost. Doesn't really want to collapse in yet. We just want to make sure those pleats are there and that our pinches are a little neatened here. These pleats will also help us see how neat our creases were and if certain things need a little bit of adjusting. Because if the creases don't line up with the intersections, that's going to be a problem. Another thing to note here is you really want to be kind of as accurate as you can with this process for the rows. You really want it to remain square, the paper, through all this. So what I'm showing now is where you see those short diagonals. We're just going to pop the corners of them down without reversing the crease direction. And that's going to create a new set of creases where I'm highlighting with the embossing tool. So as you can see, it creates those two new creases, those two new valleys, just like that. I'm going to do that all the way around, just working those creases in, getting them started. Showing the underside, how you can see there's these points forming. Now we have one last corner to pop in. And then from here, it's just working the collapse in place, continuing to reinforce creases where we want them. And this will eventually lay flat. And those corners you saw on the other side will kind of point in to the very center of the model. And it should start to like collapse on its own along creases all we made. So we're just going to keep folding, keep folding. It's almost collapsed. And then you'll see we have that little square on top, little diagonal square. Before we do anything more, we really want to get everything laying flat though. We want to check our pleats, make sure at this point onward too, you want to be very careful the pleats don't splay and shift too badly. You're trying to keep these pleats along their guidelines as much as possible. This tiling here is the same also as my rose tessellation tiling. This is how I do my dozen roses. This is with this unit or this tile. May not look like a rose right now, but if you were to open up that twist, you'd basically have a rose. It wouldn't have any outer petals, but it would look kind of like a little center of a rose. So when you pack this tessellation really tight, it does look like a bunch of roses. It's pretty cool. But for my Tsuru crane, we kind of want to take it to another level. So right now you can see there's these corners just hiding underneath. For now, we're just going to leave them be and just make sure the paper is nice and square and flat. Now what we're going to do is take those four corners and this pattern we created, and we're going to blintz it. If you don't know what a blintz fold is, let's just fold all four corners to the center. So that's what we're doing. We're taking that little square in the center and folding its corners over into the center. And we now have the rose tiling. If you don't remember what that looks like, Okay, pull it up here on a little bit. Oh, yeah, I didn't show it. Okay. Yeah, there it is. The rose tiling. So what we have essentially done on the left here is created the crease pattern in that little center section that is this. So the next big step is we got to redo that collapse, but bigger and over top again the same direction that we did the other one. And how much bigger we want it is, instead of each of the pleats consuming one of the units, one of the tiling, or one of the grids, sorry. So instead of each of the pleat consuming one grid unit, each pleat is going to be made up of 2 grid units this time, leaving a single grid unit left over. You'll see what that looks like. So right there is going to be our first crease instead of right against the pleat structure. Just like that. You see, if we take 2 back, we're left with 1 left over, and that's exactly how we want it. So we're going to leave that 1 kind of left over. Give it a nice good fold, make sure everything lines up and the creases aren't splaying too badly. And then sharpen your crease. And you're just going to repeat this all the way around until you have 2 grid line pleats going through. So here I'm still just doing the grid, well, not the grid, the pleats for the second collapse. So I'm gonna skip forward a little. All right, I'm gonna pause here. If you are still doing the 2 pleats all the way around, you may want to wait. At this point, one thing I will say is these pleats, it does matter the direction they're going, so do pay attention to that. With the colored side up, the inner bit of the pleat, like before, should be a mountain, and the part further away should be a valley with the colored side up, or further toward the edge. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make those mountain creases along the intersections of the innermost creases we just made. So I'm going to show it here. And remember, because we're doing 2, we got to ignore every other crease grid mark from where we're aiming. So that's what we're aiming for. It's that intersection of those 2 mountains. So we're just going to do a little pinch pinch. And we're going to go a little past where we have reference creases by about an imaginary extra reference crease on this paper, on this crease. Unfortunately, you can't see there we go. So what you're trying to do is get pinches going through like that. It's 1 unit off one grid unit off that. So you want just 45-degree creases from the edges going like that all the way around. And then you're going to put the bisect the extra diagonals. If you remember from the previous collapse, this is the part where or the crease that we would push the very point in along the center. And it would kind of make a point that goes toward the back of the model. So just going to work our way around making these creases. So again, we want to measure 2 tilings down, or 2 grid units down, before we put our crease in. As you can see, I'm pointing out that's the direction we're going. You keep greasing. Once you have all these creases in, I'm going to skip a little bit ahead. There you go. Once you got all these creases in, I'm going to pause so you can see. Once you have these creases in, optionally you can add in the little valleys toward the edges, like I do it here. So a lot of wavefold is a bunch of mountains, so now we need to up those valleys. There should already be a crease there along the grid. Just make sure it's going the right way. And once you have all that in, we're basically just doing the same collapse we did earlier. Just a little larger, and thus also, in some ways, a little easier. The only part that's tricky is the very corner petals that are currently facing you. They have an extra pleat going through them, which makes it a little bit hard. Because they don't always want to water bomb collapse at those points. There we go. And now we just kind of push it in and give it its little collapse. Should kind of go in easier, but you also want to make sure you're not spreading the pleats on those corners too much. So it's going to be a lot of pushing the corners underneath in while making sure the corners on top are also staying relatively sharp. At this point, I'm just going to skip a little bit ahead to the end of the collapse. There we go. So now you can see it's the same collapse. I'm going to go ahead and pause here. You're still working on the second collapse. Again, it's the same collapse we did, smaller around the twist. But if you're still working on that, go ahead, finish that up. So if you're done with the collapse, now is a good time to unpause for the second collapse. The main thing here is before you do anything else with this collapse, you're going to want to make sure, one, all the corners are nice and neat, everything is laying really nice and flat. The square itself, like the square profile you're left with, is still relatively square. That's going to be important when you got to do the crane over top. If it ends up not being perfectly square, those pleats can be adjusted to kind of reposition some of the edges around them. So before we do anything more on this side, we need to get these outer petals where I'm touching with the embossing tool. Those petals don't exist in this model yet. At least not on the side we want them. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip the whole thing over and look at the other side. And there you'll see 4 corners that aren't held down by anything. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to very carefully, without tearing the paper, I'm just folding those corners down as far as they go so that you can see those will be the outermost petals in the model. However, they're still not the right color and they're still going the wrong way because we really want them going on the side we have a desired colored on, not inside the body of the row or body of the crane. We want a crane on the back, not on the stomach, or the flower petals in the back, not in the stomach. So what we gotta do now is close sync those corners through to the other side, which sounds daunting, but you don't want to approach it like a regular close sync. Instead, we're going to rearrange all the paper layers into effectively a closed sync. So if I open up that corner by pulling on that, you see how you have basically an open sunk preliminary base or water bomb base corner kind of popping in there. We're going to pop it the other way again. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take that corner, that edge, just going to form a corner. And we're just going to push it. So I'm showing you again. Right now it was like that. You push it back out. Then you take that corner, and you want that corner to touch the very top of that top center of that rectangle toward the twist. So you'll see what I do here. Kind of push that up. And now I gotta reflatten. Just like that. You can see it. If some of the paper doesn't want to cooperate, which does happen, I think on the last sink, you can use like a toothpick or an embossing tool, a dull toothpick or embossing tool, and kind of run it in those creases inside to try to get them a little neater. And now you just repeat that closed sink on all 4 corners, or all 3 remaining corners, so that you have 4 outer petals. Once you have done the closed sinks, you can also kind of push them, as you can see from the other side, to kind of adjust them a little. Kind of slide them around. We don't need to worry about countersinking the innermost petals because they won't be visible beneath the rose formation. They'll be hidden anyways, no matter what we do. Here I'm showing that in the crease pattern for the final product, you'll notice those corners aren't there. That's because I think Orietta had those corners collapsed inside the twist pockets. So those corners are kind of hidden underneath the twist. Just the way I arrange the layers. So I'm just going to finish off these closed sinks. Once you have the closed sinks done, you'll be ready for the next step. For right now, I'm going to skip through these closed sinks. There should be enough footage for you to see what's going on. If not, feel free to leave a comment or contact me. You know how to contact me on Reddit or Origami Dan Discord. I can explain the sinking process a bit better. But for now, I'm just going to skip through the sinks. So at this point, I think I have done the sinks. Once I flip it over, I'll know for sure. Oh, one more sink. Okay, now you see this is just me adjusting. So if you're still working on the sinks, go ahead and pause here. Alright. Hopefully at this point you've finished the sinks, and now you are ready to start the creases for the outermost petals. What I'm doing right now is just flattening the paper with a folding tool, making sure everything is as well aligned as it can be, and the paper is as flat as it can be. Now, if you remember when we did the twist, we did a blintz fold. We're going to do something a little different with this square. This square, we're going to do preliminary folds on all 4 corners into the center. And to do that, we want to take the very center of the outer edges of this inner square and just fold them into the center. So instead of folding the corners to the center, we're folding edges to the center now. So all 4 edges to the center. And just do that all the way around. It'll kind of look like you have all these little rabbit ears forming. Skip ahead a little. There we go. So we got all the rabbit ears. Now with your pointy tool, you just want to open up those pockets and finish off these preliminary folds. If you're not here yet, feel free to pause. Alright, so hopefully you have paused, you've gotten to this step. So we're just in the process of taking a toothpick or maybe the end of a folding tool. We want to open up those 4 pockets into preliminary folds like I had mentioned and flatten it out. Might take some coaxing to get it started. That starts some of the outer petals, and we're going to do this all the way around. Once you've done those preliminary folds, let me go back just a little so you can see it. Yep. As you can see, once you've done these little preliminary folds all the way around, you can go ahead and pause. Wait for the next step. Okay. So we have our preliminary folds going around. You can kind of see where the outer petals kind of sink around. So now we got to actually start folding the crane. And to do this is we're going to start by folding the edges first of our preliminary base. And it won't be easy because you're not going to be able to fold the center flat. The center where the rose is very thick and it will not want to lay flat. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to make kind of like partial rabbit ears coming off to start the preliminary fold. And you'll see what I mean by this. So those creases are going to be mountains. So I'm going to start that there. So if the colored side is up, you want the horizontal and vertical folds to be mountains. And when you start getting to the really thick part, as you can see, I'm just going to pinch it and kind of create a rabbit ear just along those pleats. A really shallow rabbit ear. You don't want that angle to be 45. You want it to be more like 22, 20-degree angle coming off the center rose. So as you can see, that is not quite 22 degrees. It's going to actually make my life harder when I get to the crane, but that's okay. We still complete this. I do end up having to adjust some of these to be a little closer to the rose, these pinches. As you can see, as we do this, the corners are kind of starting to meet like they would in a preliminary base, but we still can't get it to lay flat, unfortunately. And at this point, it really won't lay flat for the rest of the model. And it's going to feel like you need like another hand and 3 more fingers on each hand to get the things to stay while you fold and do this. Because from here on out, too, you got to be really careful that none of those pleats spread when you don't want them to spread. But you don't really want to lock them either, because there are times where in the process of doing a fold, you want them to be able to free themselves and spread. So there I'm showing you how the creases will kind of like to shift around the pleats. And you're going to be constantly resetting those pleats. But there'll be some folds where having that play where it can accordion out and then come back in will be one of the only ways of getting really some of these folds in without them tearing. Getting that play, especially the reverse folds when you're getting the head and tail. Reverse folded in. So here I'm just pinching the very corners that I want to be the wings, head and tail. I'm going to focus on one for right now. Kind of just checking how well I kept my square neat. Wasn't too bad. So now what we're going to do is where we have those diagonals we made early on to find the center of the paper. If you remember, I mentioned you wanted to make those diagonals really sharp on the very tips of the paper, the very corners of the paper where we're messing with now. And the reason for that is we're going to start our petal folds kind of in 3D. So we're going to make the bird base as if we were doing it as a collapse. So we're going to take one raw paper edge and bisect the corner into a 22.5 angle. So we're just taking that raw paper edge to one of those diagonals that we made early on. And we're going to walk that diagonal up so that it stays lining up with center until we hit one of the horizontal creases that we made for the preliminary. So there you can see. Right, yep, about there is where I want to pinch it. And then you're just going to repeat that working around. So you're going to line up those edges with the diagonals, walking those edges up until you hit the center crease as shown there, and then you go to the next one. You're just going to keep doing this around the model. I'm going to go ahead and skip forward a little because this is just a lot of meticulous walking creases the same way over and over again. As you can see, you just keep walking the creases, skipping segments. At this point, you'll notice the pleats past the bird base will splay a little, but you're going to kind of push them back in later as you finish shaping the bird base and the crane. There we go. So it almost looks like a shuriken star from above or like some weird table. But that is the start of a bird base. If you're not here yet because I was skipping around, go ahead and pause the video. I'm just making sure my pleats are kind of tight. You can pause the video here and get to the bird base, or the rough outline of a bird base, if you will. Now is a good time to unpause if you've gotten to the bird base. What I'm going to do is I'm picking two flaps to be the wings. And the wings will come kind of out directly. And then I'm going to kind of rabbit ear what will be the leg and the head, or the leg and the neck, down. So what I'm trying to do is keep one wing kind of going up at an angle. And you'll see kind of the structure I'm going for. And the other wing will also be creased, but eventually will kind of go straight down. Because what we're trying to do now is get ready to narrow out the legs and the tail. So we're trying to get the bird base as tight and formed as possible on the creases. So we're reinforcing any creases we're going to need. And this is the shape you're going for here. So right now I'm just fixing a leg. So I wasn't happy with how it was coming off. Just trying to, the tip was a little crumpled, so I'm trying to straighten it out without fraying the paper. There we go. So now you see you have the leg and the tail. And a lot of this is just shaping the crane around the Rose version 2 tiling. And to get the legs and head thinner like a traditional crane would be, I'm going to take one of the wingtips up, kind of up and out. It won't go directly, straight up because the center is very thick. And then I'm going to kind of lay the legs and the wingtip flat along the table like that. What you'll notice is the other wing will and legs will be bent at a weird angle. So you won't be able to thin one half of the model, but this allows you to get the other half to where you can kind of thin it. So while trying to keep the layers from spreading in the middle too much, try to fold that raw, no, sorry, not raw, the folded paper edge to the raw middle edge. Like that. And the crease will kind of go from the very tip of the head or tip of the tail. It'll walk up, kind of like how you did the bird base. You're just walking the crease up from the point and following that edge. And now here, when you get to the thick part, you're just going to kind of skip some of the crease where it's really thick and continue straightening out the crease by the wings. And that's kind of what it looks like there. At this point, you're just going to repeat that thinning of the model on the other side. So while we have this half of the model lying flat, we want symmetry. So we're just going to very carefully thin the other. All right. And now that half is looking good symmetrically. See, if I hold it together, it looks kind of like a crane that's already pulled apart. And now we're going to bend that half the other way. So we're going to take those legs and fold them down the other way, kind of locking in those creases we just made. Right now I'm just trying to make sure the legs and the tail stay relatively uniform. It's looking pretty good. And now I need to get these other wing and legs flat in a way where I can thin them out too. So I'm just going to fold over along the middle, getting those two flaps to kind of shift the other way and repeat what I just did on the one half on the other half. So now we're going to thin the other half of the leg and the neck and the head. Just going to skip ahead a little. Alright, so we've got the leg and the head thinned. You're still working on getting that thinned. Go ahead and pause here. Actually, I think I'm still doing it here in this video. I had some of the pleats fray and caused them to be visible on the wings while I was fixing that. Skip forward a little more. There we go, we're almost done with thinning. Yeah, it looks better. Okay, so now what we're doing is we're pushing, as you can see, as uniformly as we can. We're trying to push the rows around, trying to manipulate as much as we can so we can get to our reverse folds. Trying to just smush the center as best as humanly possible. We're going to unsmush it later. For this reverse fold, I recommend starting it just along like maybe the bottom half of the thin part of the tail rather than going straight for the full reverse fold. You'll kind of see why. You're kind of trying to position the wing profile with the legs as sort of like a sharp V. Right now I'm just adjusting, there we go. So it's like a sharp V and I'm just starting the reverse fold. And now, as you can see, I started the reverse fold, Unfortunately, this off camera. Let me get back. There we go. And I just kind of walk that reverse hold up as best I can. And as far as I can. I think I decide to have this be the head. So you just do another reverse fold for the head. That one's pretty easy once you got the big reverse fold in. And then you're going to repeat the process for the reverse fold for the neck there, where you just kind of finagle it. I mean, it's not an easy fold. Just be very careful with these reverse folds. It's very easy to tear the paper underneath the rose. You don't have a lot of layers. You have a raw paper edge that you're reverse folding around. And because the rest of the model is so thick, it is very easy to tear. You'll notice the head kind of starts to point down as I do this. That's fine. When I re-push the rest of the model in, it will... Here we go. Here you can kind of see the reverse fold. Oh, come on. It's not going off camera. There. So I'm kind of just trying to pull that reverse fold as far up into that kind of messy, thick layers of paper in the bottom of the crane. And now we just shape the tail, walk that reverse fold up as much as we can to try to get the proportions more in line with the regular crane. And once we're happy with our neck and tail and our wings and general proportions, the next big step is to shape the rose. So if you're still trying to get these reverse folds in, go ahead, pause the video. It'll be here. Try to figure this out up to this point. And then when you're ready, you can unpause the video and we will do the rose portion. Alright. So, okay, so we're starting on the rose. So at this point, what I want to do is you can see where you have those 4 preliminary folds kind of sticking out. I'm still needing stuff up here. There we go. These 4 preliminary folds are going to be petal folded out. Not quite as dramatically as you would for like a crane, neck, and wings. But you don't want to just valley fold either. You kind of want it to go somewhere in between a true petal and just a valley. Just kind of shape that petal, and then you repeat that petal fold on all 4 sides. It's not really much of a petal fold. You might have to, like you can see here, fix proportions and other things that shift as you do this. And that's kind of the first step for that. The next big step is finding the inner petals. So when we did the petal fold, it'll expose those little corners. Those corners kind of like to come undone as you do the petal fold, but if you curl them back, they'll look like petals. That's what I'm doing. I'm grabbing those little points inside and just curling them back a bit. The next big step is the outermost petals. So those are the innermost petals. The outermost petals are those sinks we did, and you want to kind of arrange them so they fall in between the layers of the second to innermost petals. Just like that. And you want to walk those outermost petals as far up as you can. Just like such. Once you're happy, or roughly happy with these outer petals, I wouldn't worry about it too much because the rose is gonna, the center twist part of the rose is gonna shift them some more. So don't over fret how well shaped these are, but once you kind of have it opened enough that you can see the innermost collapse you did, you might want to pause if you're not there yet. So you can't see that innermost four corners from the innermost collapse that I'm tracing with my tool. Go ahead and pause until you kind of get to here. Alright, so now what we're doing is we're folding those little corners up from the innermost collapse. So the innermost corners, these will not actually quite be petals. These are going to be kind of like the edges of the twist of the center of the rose. So we're just folding those little four corners up as far as we can. Skip forward a little. Just like that. And then there'll be little pockets inside the twists. As part of the twist, you'll see. So there's these little creases inside. And with a toothpick or folding tool or something pointy, you want to open up a little bit, you see, of one of those little pockets. And then where you kind of have the pocket next to it further freed, go ahead and get that one a little more freed with your folding tool. Just being careful not to tear or punch through the paper here. And now keep rotating, continuing, opening up the twist, and eventually you'll start to see it opens up a lot more. This one, and now you kind of start to see the rose come. At this point, I like to run the folding tool or toothpick or whatever kind of along the inside of that twist to kind of shape it into a more rounded rose look. So at this point, it really is just shaping. If you want the twist to kind of sit higher up on the rose and have it kind of rest above the petals, what you want to do is kind of get your toothpick or whatever you were using up underneath one of the walls of the twist, which you'll see here shortly. And you're going to gently tug and pull up on it, kind of shifting some of the layers, and you'll see what that looks like. So I'm going to take, you see you can kind of hook it in, and then with your hand, back brace so you don't just punch through. And you see how I can shift the whole set of paper up. And at this point, really, it's just shaping. So you can shift how far that twist comes up and then reopen up the twist, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Adjust any pleats or spreaded, pleats that you didn't like how they looked. Adjust the petals the way you like, etc. Here you can see I'm still shaping, trying to pull that twist out, but keep it a little more open. Eventually I get something I'm pretty happy with. Here. Like I said, it's all just really shaping. Once you get that crease pattern done, it's all a matter of just shaping the crane around it, just about. And you get that beautiful rose crane. Enjoy.